It is the first day of the 3-game stretch. If you're a Penn State football fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The 3 games that you care about most on the Penn State football schedule, they begin today. And we're going big on the BWI Daily Edition live show. Because it was the bye week, I've watched all the film. So we're going to talk about Penn State, Michigan. We're going to talk about the previous 5 games of the season. We're going to get you teed up for Penn State, Michigan. I'm hyped. Let's get it going on the BWI Daily Edition. Nate Bauer, BWI Daily Edition Monday co-host with us today. Nate, you're going to have to do some heavy lifting today because I've got a lot of things in my brain, and you do the best job of getting them out of my brain.
Oh, wow. I was just going to say that I don't know if I can match your intensity here, but I'm going to try. There won't be any yelling out of me, though. I'm sorry.
That might have scared people. I apologize about that. If you're watching the show today here live on YouTube Monday night, I know we're going to give it Monday Night Football, but it's only Pat Mahomes. Who cares? We're talking about Penn State football.
Boo.
We're talking about the thing. Nate, it's the 3-game stretch. And
It
no
is.
longer can we talk about who have you played. We can't talk about, but.
Yeah.
This is a good team versus a good team. We're going to find some stuff out this weekend. No weather. I'm excited for that. Off the bat.
Yeah.
What's one thing you want to learn about Penn State this weekend when they face Michigan? Just one thing you don't think we've learned yet, but we can and will on Saturday.
That's hard to limit to one thing, I think, because first of all, I don't want to downplay Penn State winning at Purdue to open the season. I think that's a good win. Like, I still think that that's a good win. I know Purdue has a loss or 2 at this point, but I still think that Purdue team is pretty good or decent at least. And so that win counts in my book. Auburn is its own set of problems, but Penn State still did fairly well against that defense. So, like, discounting Penn State's offense because it really hasn't faced a defense other than that one, I don't think is fair either. But what's one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, and this is a thing that I shouldn't have to say at this point, but Sean Clifford, what version is he going to be? And certainly I understand the narrative and the conversation that happens out there in the ether of him having all of that evidence being on film and you knowing exactly what he's going to be. I don't necessarily buy that narrative, particularly in bigger games. I think that he has had pretty good games under pressure that have had, as James Franklin talked about this offseason, between 3 and 5 backbreaking type plays that have torpedoed what are otherwise mature, heady, solid efforts. And so I want to see that. I want to see what that effort looks like from him in a game that demands it more than what the Auburn game earlier this year did.
So the way you phrased it is right, but the number you said is my problem because
it's more than 3 to 5.
No. It's
13 to 15 backbreaking plays per game.
It is 3 to 5, but if you throw the ball 30 times, that's 10% of your passes are turnover worthy, to borrow a PFF term. If you fumble the ball and you give them the ball, or you potentially put the ball in harm, that is not a mature, heady performance then. Like, you have officially crossed that line from 1 or 2, which is, against a good team. But your point is valid, though. Your point is valid about Sean Clifford and making so many good decisions and doing so many things to keep you in the game. Because it can't be a big game if you're getting blown out, and they have not been blown out on a regular basis. So that's absolutely true, but it's just that knife in the back that you're waiting for if you're a Penn State fan. And if that keeps you up at night, Nate, if
it
that is
it does not keep me awake. I sleep like a baby. But I understand why Penn State fans do.
if it is something that causes you anxiety, if you find yourself on message boards late at night typing with a furrowed brow into your computer, and you find yourself in a state of constant frustration where you're yelling at other individuals on the internet, you may have Sean Clifford fatigue. Ask your doctor for signs and symptoms to see if you have Sean Clifford fatigue. And if you do, a great remedy for Sean Clifford fatigue is rogueshop.com. Use the promo code BWI for 10% off of some of the best product you can get when it comes to CBD, THC, and more. I am a satisfied customer. When I need to sleep, I got a big day the next day. I am not a person who sleeps well. Either it's stress, I forget to eat sometimes, and then like I'm up all night because I'm hungry. All kinds of stuff happens. I get all a whack. I am not a great sleeper. So when I need something to get me to bed, and if you have chronic insomnia or anything like that, I use the Delta 9 gummies, but they got plenty of different things that can help you get to sleep. If you have chronic pain, another part of Rogue Shop's mission is to help people. As a disabled veteran, Richard from Rogue Shop is all about helping people with pain, THC, CBD. They do these things at a very natural and holistic level. If you suffer with chronic inflammation or any of those things, check out their CBD tinctures. The tinctures, they take about 30 minutes to 1 hour to take into effect, but they affect the entire body. It is a whole system situation where you are going to be knees, joints, ligaments, muscles, everything is going to be affected by the tinctures. So check them out. Again, promo code BWI for rogueshop.com. And you don't have to live in silence suffering from Sean Clifford fatigue. So, Nate.
Poor Sean Clifford. Lay off this guy.
I needed it for a transition.
I know. But I'm reading the comments. And I feel bad. I don't.
Oh, I don't know about this, Stephen Light.
Guys.
You see, I get it. Okay. So you want to talk a little bit about the setup to the game, and I think that's an important place to start.
Sure.
Penn State's 5-0 coming into the game. They're ranked in the top 10. We're at the separation point that we're in every single season where Penn State is 5th, 4th, 6th, and then they play the tough games. What is it about this team that is different or the same this year that you've seen through 5 games?
Oh, man. Well, I take issue with the way that you set that up. That's my first issue.
Sorry.
I don't.
Well, what do you want to talk about then?
No. Like I do want to get to that, but I think this narrative of, oh, they get to 5-0 every season, they get to 6-0, and then they actually have to play the tough games. Like, I reject that. I just do. And so, but it's not your fault, and I don't even know if that's necessarily your opinion, but I do think that is the larger conversation that happens around Penn State football based on the success of 2016. Well, they were 2-2 in 2016, right? That season turned into something else, okay? But 2017 they were 7-0. 2018 they had a loss at some point in kind of early middle of the season. That Ohio State game obviously was in early October, I believe it was. 2019, they were 8-0 before they got to Minnesota and lost that game. 2020 was a disaster. It was what it was. 2021, 5-0. Okay. So I get it. But it's not like there weren't wins that happened that were relevant and good in the moment before then. So that's the first thing I have to say is they have passed tests previously to get to that 5-0. And you look around the country, there are a lot of teams that should be ahead of Penn. Like, Penn State has risen to 10th in the rankings without having beaten a top 10 type team yet. But there are a lot of teams who were ranked ahead of Penn State that lost games that they had no business losing. And so the credit has to be given to Penn State for having passed every test that's been on the schedule to this point. Now, where is this Penn State team right now? I'm not sure. I think that winning games against a top 5 team on the road is very hard to do. It goes without saying. People love to point out things like a coach's record against top 5 teams in general, or even top 10 teams in general. Guess what? Most coaches lose most of their games against top 5 teams that are if their team is the lower ranked team, they will usually lose that game. So that is kind of where my head is at on this one, is that, Michigan's favored to win this game, and it's going to be very challenging for Penn State to win this game. But does Penn State have the pieces or the ingredients that could allow it to win the game? Yeah, I do. I think so. The defense is very good, and I think that the offense has shown enough flashes that if they can somehow sustain some of those flashes, they will have an opportunity to win.
Yeah, I think these two teams are incredibly similar. And I not a mirror image, not a carbon copy, but they have similar strengths. I think they have similar question marks, and I think they have similar players at a lot of different positions, and it's going to make for an even game. Zoe asked me today, she's like, who's going to win? And I said, honestly, I don't know. This is going to be a really fun game to watch, because everything sets up for it to be a battle on both sides of the football. There's not a clear dominant advantage, I think, for either team. So when we get into talking about the game and all of those things, this is going to tell you a lot about both teams, because you mentioned Michigan has not really played a lot of tough competition. Now, again, not to take 3 Big Ten wins away from them, but Iowa is struggling this year. Beating Maryland is a good win. Maryland is a good team, and Indiana is always a tough out. But you look at some of their weaknesses and some of the things they're doing for a game plan. They're clearly an overmatched team. So both teams, I think I actually think Penn State has been more battle tested so far this year, despite the fact that Michigan's been in the fourth quarter with some of these teams and has been pressing to win. Like, they had to pull it out in the fourth quarter. I want to get to this, though, because this is awesome. James says, I have my third to last exam ever at Penn State tomorrow. Please help me procrastinate studying. James, if you don't graduate, I'm coming to find you. And apologize that I distracted you from your exam.
T. Frank, I have a question that just popped into my head that I think is interesting that we should discuss.
Okay.
Let's say that last year doesn't exist, and that the rankings in the preseason don't exist. Okay. Yep. Everyone starts from unranked. Where would Penn State and where would Michigan be ranked right now if the first week of rankings were today?
Do I still know everything I know about Penn State minus last year?
You know only the things that have happened in games this year for Penn State. And the only thing that you know about Michigan are games that have been played this week, and they didn't start the season. Michigan did not start the season ranked in the top 5. Like, they were it's just both unranked. Where would they be?
So without knowing the rest of the teams, and we're starting with the baseline.
I'm just saying where.
No. I'm getting to the answer. I'm getting to the answer. I'm getting to your answer here. I know what you're driving at. I would say, like, if these are both top 10 teams, not knowing the rest of the country and not understanding any of that stuff, 7 and 8, 8 and 9. I think that Michigan's a little bit inflated right now, and Penn State is probably accurately ranked.
Yep.
But both of these teams are not. I think, if you wanted to say, like, neither of these teams are top 10 teams because you believe that they're both going to finish with 2 losses, I could see that. I could also see one of them finishing with 1 loss and being in the conversation somewhere.
Let me say the word that you're looking for and didn't say. These two teams are not complete.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Right? There are holes that the right opponents will exploit. That certain opponents on their schedules will be able to be better than, which is not to say that there are many out there that are complete. There aren't. Right. That's college football for you. There is no free agency. It's tough to do. But
check out the NFL, by the way. There are very few complete teams in the NFL. So it's hard to be a complete football team because you need 22 starters on offense and defense. Yeah. And by the way, for everyone that is in the chat here, and is Tennessee complete? Here's a great question. I don't know. Yep. I haven't watched Tennessee. For everyone that's asked this question, I'm just going to rip this Band-Aid off, and then I'm going to ask for something in return to everyone watching. Because the number one thing I've been asked for 2 weeks, Nate, is Yeah, but what about the Michigan offensive line? Can they do it against the Michigan offensive line? Are they going to be able to run this defense because of the Michigan offensive line? The Michigan offensive line is okay. They're okay. They're not. I'm not trying to tear them down to their appropriate ranking like Auburn, but they do need to take a step back in your mind as an entity because of a couple of different things. And I'll tell you after you hit the like button, please.
Boom.
We're 15 minutes into the show. I haven't begged for a like just yet. Like we're giving you the good stuff today. You're going to get all the inside information about Michigan and how they match up with Penn State and all that stuff. So a like is free. If you want to donate to the channel, be one of our regulars that gives through super chats. Always appreciated. We're taking your questions in the in the chat as well today, but we're going to break down all that stuff. And if you like the video, it helps everyone else know the video is happening and that we're getting you the Monday preview, the biggest week of the season until next week. So yeah, the Michigan offensive line is okay. Don't forget, this is the same Michigan offensive line that allowed 9 pressures and 2 sacks to Arnold Ebiketie a year ago. And Penn State is not far off that production in terms of replicating that player this year. So 3/5 of that offensive line is back, and they're not especially great at stopping, at running between the tackles, Nate. This is something that over the last 3 games, I was watching this, and then I went and looked at the stats to see if I was right, and I love it when that happens, that I am. I had a whole graphic for it, and it's not here. So I'll just tell you. I know. Live radio, right? Live TV, live YouTube. Blake Corum over the last 3 games against Indiana, Maryland, Iowa, and Indiana. In between the tackles, he ran for 19 yards, 65 yards, and 31 yards. Then on the edges of the box, outside the tackles, he ran for 179, 58, and 90. Keep him between the tackles because the interior of this line is okay. But Penn State is good. So you have an advantage there. And Penn State, Indiana was able to keep them to 19 yards. Do you think, Nate, that Penn State has more talent at defensive tackle than Indiana?
I mean, I don't know anything about Indiana, but I would guess.
They do. The answer is yes, they do. They do. Indiana is always a better team than you expect, but they are not supremely talented. They got guys that can do specific things, but overall, Penn State's a better, defensive line, clearly. Yep. So this group is going to be able to play with the Wolverines. And if they can handle Blake Corum on the edges of the tackle box and they have athletic defensive ends to chase,
Curtis
athletic
Jacobs,
linebackers, exactly.
John
Penn
Sutherland
State can contain. The 3 players I am concerned about. John Sutherland has been much better this year in contain. He did a great job against Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. So he's faced this test before, but he's facing it again. And they're going to give the ball to Corum. They're not going to forget to give him the ball until the 4th quarter like they did with Bigsby. So I think that is him on the edge playing contain, I think is a big thing. And then in coverage, Penn State's linebackers, their middle linebackers, they're not speedy. They're not sideline to sideline fast. Neither of them. So if you're playing man coverage and you line one of those guys up against Corum and he goes on a wheel route, hold your breath. Because he's fast and they are going to struggle to keep up. So hiding those guys in coverage, that's going to be a big thing, but they can play between the tackles. That Penn State fans should feel good about that matchup. And the defensive line overall, this offensive line for Michigan hasn't really faced a pass rush.
Yep.
They've not faced an offensive line or defensive line with legitimate speed and power to complement what they can do on the ground. And I think you're going to see, especially with the right tackle, Trent Jones going down last week, if Penn State can get McCarthy into 3rd and long, I think it's ball game. And he's a really interesting player. He's a really interesting player we need to talk about too.
Yeah, let's where should we start here? Here's my question.
Okay.
What if you're a Penn State fan watching this, this might not be the direction that you want to go, but what do you like about Michigan that you've seen? I know that you've been able to watch Michigan. Blake Corum, you like him.
Yeah.
JJ McCarthy, like, but whether you want to start on offense or defense, like what about this Michigan team has allowed them to be as successful as they've been so far this season?
I think that it's just that they're a good team. So their offensive line is good. It's not there's lower levels of offensive line play in the NFL and in college football. So the idea of road graders, guys that are big, nasty, pull you down to the ground, pancakes, all that stuff. A couple guys do that. But overall, it's really hard to get 5 really good offensive linemen that drive, block, and pass protect. These guys fall somewhere in the middle of all of that stuff. So they're a good offensive line, but when you hold them up to the standard of what you expect from physicality, movement, all those things, they're not intimidating. They shouldn't be for Penn State's defense. Mm-hmm. It's an even matchup, but they're a good offensive line. Ronnie Bell's a good receiver. Blake Corum is electric. JJ McCarthy, they've built the offense, in my opinion, they've built the offense around his skill set. So they're going more spread. They're doing more play action. They're getting guys wide open in space. They're using the threat of Blake Corum while still using Blake Corum. So it's all working when it's working. Mm-hmm. Defensively, they've got a good secondary. Again, this is the correlation between the two is that when the running game's explosive and they can help the quarterback out, they're a dangerous offense with an offensive line that is capable. Mm-hmm. But they don't have depth at receiver as far as playmakers. Defensively, they've got a good secondary. That team plays well together. They do a lot of really interesting things on the back end that can confuse. They can play a lot of different coverages. And they're only a couple coverage busts, but for the most part, they're a good coverage unit, starting DBs. Maybe we're not talking about the linebackers in that conversation. And then they got like 3 good pass rushers. Mike, what's his name? Number 90. Mike Morris is their best pass rusher. And just like Penn State, they've got a couple of other guys, Jalen Harrell and Ayabi Oki. Both those guys are good rushers they have a little bit more of a flaw in what they do, but they have potential. And I think both of those guys, are young guys that are developing. So really similar to Penn State as well in that area. So the flaws are similar. The strengths are similar. Their middle linebacker can't cover, but he's a good run defender. Like it all levels. It's all kind of level. And yes, Steven, I would agree that Michigan's D-line is not as good as it was last year. They lost 2 first-round picks, and those guys I don't think the guys I just mentioned have not replenished that just yet.
Right. It sounds so Penn State's playing Penn State this weekend and Michigan's playing Michigan this weekend. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. And can our offense keep up though, says Garrett Hassinger. We'll get to that in a little bit because I do want to talk about JJ McCarthy because that's, you've got to keep up. You got to know what you're keeping pace with. Nate, I found some really interesting. Some really interesting stats were spat at me recently when I'm like, is McCarthy good? Yeah. Like I'm interested in what people think of JJ McCarthy so far. And of course, 78% completion percentage. One of the best, I think maybe the most accurate in the nation. So he's accurate, right? He completes a lot of footballs. But I found a lot of interesting things. I said earlier he throws from a clean pocket all the time.
Yeah.
80% of the time, 80.5% of the time, he is throwing from a clean pocket. No pressure. He's faced 18 pressures all season long. He's also thrown to wide open receivers on a regular basis. And in that completion percentage, 52.5% of his passes have traveled less than 9 yards, 0 to 9 yards. So dink and dunk, small ball, play action. This is also not a balanced offense that can throw the ball deep. They don't have a deep passing game. And I think his mechanics are super interesting. I struggle with knowing how to feel about him.
Yeah. I love you using the word interesting because I don't think that's what you actually think.
So no, but here's the interesting thing is that he is a good quarterback. Like I would say that he is the better quarterback in this game as far as how he's performed this season. And his overall skill set, because when he's standing back there in that clean pocket, I don't see him panicking. Now, you'll get that antsy sort of thing of like, I've been back here 5 seconds. I should get rid of the football. Every bone in my body is screaming. But he's still scanning the field. So I think he reads the defense well, and he finds the right receivers to throw to. But here, I'll just show you what bothers me. His throwing motion is baseball all the way. He is what Auburn wishes Robbie Ashford was, in terms of a athletic baseball player with all the baseball throwing mechanics. They do this thing where they kick their leg out when they're throwing, like they're throwing a baseball to first, like when they're trying to get an out at first. That is not a consistent football mechanic. Both of them have this big wind up where his elbow comes really high, and generally his footwork is okay. So there's a lot of leakage in how he plays football. But he still gets there. He still gets to be accurate.
Yeah.
But it's that pressure. 80% of the time you're thrown from a clean pocket. If you've got bad mechanics and no one's forcing you into those old bad mechanics, well, what happens when they do?
Right.
Because that's going to happen this weekend.
What does happen when they do? What has happened on the 18 pressures? Do we know?
Not good. No quarterback is good under pressure, but his PFF grade is 37. He puts the ball in harm's way. He takes some sacks. He will run around forever to extend a play. But I don't think it's all great. And the other part is, when he is accurate, we're not talking about plus accuracy of putting the ball in the perfect location. So this is a little bit of the conversation we had with Aiden O'Connell, where you're throwing an out route and you leave it to the back shoulder of the receiver. Mm-hmm. The receiver can still make a play, but now the defensive back can make a play too. Right. You underthrow a ball, the deep ball. I think where it really comes out is the deep ball. They don't, outside of Ronnie Bell, they don't really have any threats to go down the field. Schoonmaker is their number 2 receiver. And really, scheme-wise, he's their number 1. Like, they target him all the time. So when they go deep, his accuracy, that's where I think that starts to affect him, of not having super clean lower body mechanics and the arm inconsistencies and the arm angles and all that stuff. I think that's where it shows up. But we'll have to see if Penn State can get to them, and I think they can. Yeah. The offensive line has not been put in a lot of situations where they have to pass protect on 3rd and long, and when they do, they're just like Penn State. They've got massive holes at certain positions.
Do they, part of the storyline from Purdue for Penn State was Penn State's pass, right? Like, Penn State's pass rush was not part of the conversation in those first 2 games because Ohio and Purdue got the ball out so quickly most of the time. I know that you mentioned that it wasn't as consistent as it was made out to be against Purdue, but I'm just curious how quickly will Michigan try to get the ball out, and at what point, or where do you see Penn State's secondary and its ability comparing them to some of the opponents that Michigan has faced previously this season? Has Michigan seen anything like Penn State's secondary so far, I guess, is a better way to put that.
I always want to give credit to Indiana, because if you're watching what their secondary does, like, here's the thing. They're playing cover 2, which is a standard coverage. And all of a sudden, you've got one dude running in man down the middle. And I watched this for 2 or 3 times, and like, there's a certain variation of it's called Tampa 2, where you got one guy that drops all the way. Very famous Tampa Bay Buccaneers coverage. Derek Brooks used to run 20 yards down the field and sit in the area that's the weakness of that defense. They just decided, instead of having that guy run in a zone, that guy's in man now. Okay, that's just what Tom Allen does. Crazy stuff. He rotates his safety, so it's a hard read. But as far as talent, no, they have not faced any team that has the talent of Penn State and the ability to play tight coverage in that situation. Yeah. So that is an advantage for Penn State, which is, again, if you're forcing the ball out quickly and Penn State's jumping routes, I think it's just kind of like Penn State's situation on the offensive side of the ball, where they have a good secondary too. They're going to be active. They're going to be aggressive. I think that they can play 2 different styles of defense. They played aggressive man coverage against Maryland, and then they played zone against Indiana. So they can switch it up and do whatever they want and whatever the game plan dictates. And I think that's a similarity between these two teams.
I guess it's when we're talking about JJ McCarthy and some of the pressures that he's faced or hasn't faced so far this season, it just seems to me like the conversation all wraps together, right? How much will he be under duress? That's the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation is you mentioned him throwing to mostly open receivers.
Yep.
Well, does the quality of Penn State's defensive backs change that equation for him? Right. So in combination, then, okay, take the deep ball away. All right. That's not there for them in the first place. Can Michigan's athletes beat Penn State in the secondary on mistakes? And so, like I said, like I've been talking about for 5 weeks now, Penn State not allowing chunk plays to turn into touchdown chunk plays. Right. It just seems to me like all of those are hanging in the balance based on like a variety of different things. If the pass rush isn't there, can Penn State's secondary hang?
First off, and I hate to sound like I'm assuming I'm going to sound like Manny Diaz here. I'm going to sound like just every defensive coordinator. It starts with the run game.
Right.
Stop Blake Corum, because this is what it does. This is the point of having to stop the run first. Is you need to not worry about the run. You need to not obsess about it so you can play everything else. So if Blake Corum hits a couple of runs early, just like if Penn State hits a couple of runs early, then you're going to be over pursuing. You're going to be dedicating more resources to the box, and you're going to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of where you maybe need to be against other players. So that's why the Penn State defensive line is so important here, to control things and allow a little bit of play, so that on those hard bootlegs, when McCarthy is coming out the backside and they're doing the same old naked bootleg levels where you've got a guy going deep, you've got your intermediate route and your short route that everybody runs, and Michigan runs a lot, like Schoonmaker isn't wide the hell open, so that you have a guy, Sutherland, a safety, whoever, in the flat anticipating these things, because he's not worried that Blake Corum is going to rip off a 75-yard run on him, because you're feeling that confidence of stopping the run. So it does start from there from a psychological perspective as much as it is a tactical one. And then if you eliminate those areas, if you're playing zone, McCarthy can pick you apart. He's a good quarterback that sees the field well. He makes good decisions. And like I said, he's on those routes, he's accurate. He hits receivers where he needs to hit them. It's in those tight windows. If you can force those tight windows, and Penn State has, then I think we're going to find out more about JJ McCarthy, because he hasn't been put through a full game of that. And they scored 17 points on what was it? Was it Indiana? They were 17 to something and 17 to 10 in the fourth quarter. Yep. I think a similar outing is going to happen this week.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, right? Like it's very difficult for me to envision Penn State's defense getting certainly gutted is like, I can't necessarily see that. Penn State's defense has held up fairly well all season. Even Purdue, 31 points, 7 of those obviously were pick six. Right. So this is a Penn State defense that's given up 13.2 points per game on the whole this season. Those are fairly good numbers against the Michigan offense. That is, I think we have to consider probably the most threatening that Penn State has faced so far, or at least the most well-rounded in terms of its ability to beat you both ways.
Yeah.
How about? Go ahead.
Just quickly, Nick got this in before the show, and I appreciate him bumping him down this year. He says, Steve, Frank, and Nate, for some reason, I feel like the Penn State defense this year matches against Michigan far better than years past. Am I way off base here? Has the bye week gotten in my head? I thought they were a good match last year. I mean, they put up 24 points last year, and I think that this defense is similarly suited to go up against this offense, because despite what you might think about, at least so far from what I've seen on film, they are not running the ball out of 2 tight end sets on 70% of their plays like Nate and I rolled our eyes at last year. They're going spread, they're going pistol, they're going gun, they're doing a lot of different stuff that fits McCarthy. I think that's an important part of this, is that it fits JJ McCarthy, and they have tailored the offense around him. Now, they'll still go 2 tight ends, and they'll still pull 3 players to one side and like basically reset the offensive line on the other side. They'll still do all that stuff. They're still run focused, but they are incorporating some things that are more challenging for the defense. Yep. And I have another rant for you, but I want to get your question first.
Well, no, I mean, I was just going to flip the script and ask you what Penn State's offense is up against. Right? I mean, do you want to get to that at this point, or do you still have a few things more to say about Michigan's offense?
So just one last thing, and yep. I probably bothered James Franklin enough asking about the pistol, but I swear to you, every offseason, every coach, like I know they have coaching meetings and association meetings, but I think they all sit down at one of these, like in a back room, and they're like, "All right, guys, what are we running this year? What are we all doing? What's the new wrinkle we're agreeing to this year?" Because I know that everyone's run pistol for a while, but now everyone's running pistol. Everyone's running condensed formations so they can get their running back to the outside. Everyone's doing all of the same things. Michigan a year ago did not go into the gun almost at all, or at least, you know, they were heavy focused on power and running the football, old school stuff. And this year it's wide open. And I don't know, like, do we all agree there's like 9 things you have to do and then the 10th is yours to be different? I don't know what's going on, but I want to know. There's a conspiracy here somewhere.
Okay. We're going to get to the bottom of it before this week is over, buddy. I promise.
Okay.
How about we were talking a little bit before the show about Nick Singleton and just how both of these teams have talented running backs, obviously. But Nick Singleton can't be mentioned without Kaytron Allen being part of the equation as well. Where do you see not necessarily a one-to-one comparison, but how Penn State's running backs collectively could fare against this Michigan's defense?
It's going to be a tough day to run up the middle. They're very good stout on the interior. I got to get his name up here because 58 is a good Maisie Smith, I think is his name. 58, a lot of talent, 330 some pound defensive tackle, little inconsistent. But just generally Michigan, this is where I think the difference between the two teams of they're both good at stopping the run. Michigan does it with old school big bodied defensive tackles. You know, they're a little thicker up front consistently across the board. They did struggle with outside zone against Iowa, but who doesn't? And I do think that part of that is that size versus the movement. And Penn State was able to get a couple against Northwestern, similar players, but Michigan's are better athletes than that. So I don't think that's going to be a viable option. 25, the linebacker, his name escapes me because it's not my team that I cover, but 25 is a good run defender. And so I think up the middle is going to be a problem this week. So a lot of the same old Penn State gripes are going to come back of they can't run between the tackles. They can't X, Y, and Z. Well, this team is designed to stop those things, but get them onto the edge of the defense. And I think you can see. Yeah. There's an area though, that I do think that Michigan's defense in stopping the run is an advantage for them because I think they are a little cleaner in terms of the whole picture of run defense. I was
just going to say, running between the tackles has not been Penn State's strength this season anyway. It's not like that's been, a formula that they've gone to the well a bunch of times on. And even when we look at Penn State's difference in the run game this season, understanding that Kaytron Allen has been more effective at, those kind of 5 to 8 yard carries.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Most of the change in Penn State's running game in terms of a perception standpoint is based on 5 to 7 big Nick Singleton carries.
Right.
Right.
And I want to give him credit.
Edge.
He got, and I want to make sure that we gave him credit for a little bit of progression here. He was ripping off some good runs against Northwestern. He was able to get into an alley and burst upfield. And, he's mostly, you're right. The perception is mostly based on the blowouts and the big runs. But he is more consistent, I think, than the narrative around him has been that one guy's one thing, the other guy's the other. But you're right. Like that is the thing that both teams need in this game. And I think that's the thing that Penn State might struggle a little bit more to get, because Blake Corum is an amalgamation of the talents that Penn State has in individual players at the moment.
Right.
Singleton is a better overall prospect in the long run, bigger, probably a little bit stronger at the end of his career. It's so hard because one guy is a finished product and the other one is just getting started. But right now, the individuals that Penn State has make up what you get from Blake Corum. So do you find some balance there that gets you a good rushing attack? And I should say that again, Michigan has not faced a good running game outside of the Iowa game, where they didn't face a team that could throw the ball at all,
right.
Spencer Petras.
Right.
So this is a challenge for them as well. We'll find out something about their run defense and their athletes in space against Penn State's talent at running back.
Why not save the best for last? What chance does Sean Clifford have? Let's dig into his soul.
Yeah.
To tell, from a pass rush perspective, obviously Penn State's offensive line is going to face a test there. But on the whole, where does Sean Clifford figure in to the outcome of this game? How much time do we have?
I don't know where to start with that is the problem, because we could just go right to the obvious thing that if he can hit a deep pass, it changes the entire topography of this game. If Penn State if Penn State hits a home run in the run game, it opens everything else up. If they can threaten Michigan deep, then you're going to have that. And I would say, let me start with Mike Yurcich.
Can I interrupt just very quickly?
Sure.
Can Michigan be threatened deep?
Yes. So
okay,
their
boundary,
that's a
good starting point.
Their boundary corners are good. So they are good players. If Penn State had Jahan Dotson, he could get open, but they don't have Jahan Dotson. I think Mitchell Tinsley has a couple opportunities in this game to get open on a deep route. I think Penn State can scheme them open on a deep route. But it's going to be 2 or 3 chances, right? And you've got to hit one of them. My fear would be that Mike Yurcich, if they play a lot of cover 3, Yurcich loves to attack cover 3. And if they play a lot of cover 1 and they're, press man coverage and Penn State wants to throw them out of that, you might get into a situation where you start to fall in love with the deep ball. That has been an issue at times. James Franklin has talked about not getting too far away from the run. That formula doesn't necessarily work for Penn State. So that would be a concern going into this game, that Michigan, you might see it's there and it is, but it's not, or at least it's not for you in this game with this player.
Yeah.
So the other place I'd attack is the slot. So if I'm game planning, this is a big Parker Washington game and a big Brenton Strange game in the slot. 25, the linebacker, susceptible in the pass. The number 0, the slot corner, he struggled. Iowa got him a bunch of times. I know the screen game is a big part of this. So a lot of fans have told me already, screen game is going to be big in this game. They didn't handle it well twice. Here's my problem with the screen game. First off, a lot of those were being used as a substitute for actual plays, actual run plays. And if you fall in love with those too much, they are a lower value play. You are literally throwing the ball negative yards downfield. So, and I understand it's a run and all those things are great. But if you want passing plays, you need to get the ball 9-10 yards downfield. And Penn State can do that in this game. But again, that goes to Sean Clifford versus Iowa, minus the 2 turnovers, dissecting zone coverage, seeing what they're doing. And one of the things that I think is a calling card, because I had a hard time with this Michigan defense. They don't run one coverage. Like, a lot of teams have it like a calling card. Manny Diaz loves cover 1. When he's got the athletes, he wants to play man coverage. He wants to be aggressive. Some teams like to play cover 3. Michigan will play 2. They'll play 6. They'll play 4. They'll play every zone coverage. But in third down situations, they will play 1 and 0. They will go after you. They will be aggressive. Now, they did that against Tagovailoa, who's a good quarterback. And they didn't do that against They didn't do that against Indiana. And I don't even know that quarterback's name yet because it wasn't important. I didn't need it in my brain. So, like I said, they'll do both. And that's going to be the curiosity for me is do they give the opportunity for catch and run? Brendan Strange to break a tackle, right. Parker Washington to break a tackle.
Right.
And it kind of same game plan, right? It's kind of the same game plan for both teams.
Right. But that demands Sean Clifford making the right decision quickly, correct?
Yes. Making the right decision post-snap, right. Preferably. Not making the decision pre-snap and then staring it down. That'd also be good. Yeah. So there's 1,000 other things in the offense that could work on. I know a lot of people on the message board have been pointing out accurately, talking about what zone reads. Is he supposed to give that ball off every time? That's one of those decisions I asked James Franklin about last year of throwing all the screens and the RPOs and the read options. Like, there's a lot of decisions he's got to make, and he's got to make them correctly. And a lot of that stuff kind of gets swept under the rug. And, even by me sometimes, of the results of the play is what we're evaluating. But was that the right play to begin with? Like, you have to question that part too. And those are the things that hang in the balance. To me, if that's locked in, Penn State is the team that I think can win this game because they have I think overall, they have a deeper, more talented defense, and they have a similar situation with skill players. So the advantage is ever so slightly to Penn State in my mind, like 49-51.
51, right.
But the 2% difference is McCarthy is a better quarterback. So, it's anybody's game on Saturday.
Gotcha. Is this it? Do we feel like we've exhausted our subjects for this evening, or do you have any more insights to glean?
I didn't talk about special teams, Nate. So.
Oh no, you don't want to talk about special teams.
I was never going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to start for Penn State fans coming into a week. I apologize to the chat. It seemed like you guys were keeping yourselves occupied.
Busy. Yeah.
So I wanted to have more interaction, but there was just way too much going on over there. So I appreciate everybody for being here, whether or not you're trolling Penn State or not. Please hit the like button. We have allowed you a forum to come on and talk smack politely. I only had to put one person in timeout, so that was good. Hope everyone had a good time tonight. Did you have a good time, Nate?
Always. Thanks so much for having me. And big week ahead. Tuesday press conference, Wednesday practice, obviously Thursday. I mean, it's just it'll be here before we know it. I'm looking forward to it. We'll be out there in force en masse. Blue White Illustrated at the game at the Big House. Always a fun trip. Always looking forward to it. Should be a great environment. So,
and if you, by the way, there are thousands of times that it's worth it to sign up for Blue White Illustrated to get premium access, but pregame is one of those times where Nate and Greg and Sean are there and they're saying, hey, X is not in a uniform, Y is not warming up, or B is warming up. You get that stuff pregame that you can't get from the film because it already happened, and you can't get from the TV because they're still talking about USC Stanford or whatever nonsense you don't care about. Yeah. These guys are there. Their eyeballs are peeled. They're ready for that stuff. Sign up for $1, get 12 months of access. And if you're listening at this point, thank you so much. Please like the video. Please subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube because we're setting you up to be the smartest person all week among your friends going into the game. You know so much about Michigan, and you didn't get it from just watching 20 minutes of a game on Saturday during the bye week. You got the intel. Full breakdowns coming up this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you tomorrow with the recruiting show.